Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Sukkah Daf Memvav contains two primary sugyas. The first half of the Daf is discussing the halacha of the bracha on the mitzvah of the four minim, the lulav and esrog, and the sukkah. The question will be, do you say a bracha once for the entire Yom Tov, or do you say a bracha 7 times, once for each day in which you do the mitzvah? And the second sugya which the Daf will discuss is, when can you use the esrog and the sukkah? When do you say that they're no longer set aside for the mitzvah? Once it's used already for the last time, can you use it on the 7th day of Yom Tov? Can you use it on the 8th day of Yom Tov? Possibly, can you even use it on the 9th day of Yom Tov if you're in Chutz La'aretz? That'll be the second discussion. Along the way, the Gemara will compare to the mitzvahs of Tefillin and Chanukah if they're done multiple times. Tefillin if it's done multiple times in one day. Chanukah when you light each of the days of a Chanukah. Do you make a bracha on each day, or do you make only one? It'll also bring in some other side sugyas briefly. The sugya of, you have a number of mitzvahs in front of you, do you make a separate bracha on each of them? Do you make one bracha on all of them? And an unrelated concept of not giving things to children, and when children are able to return them to you under certain circumstances. So the Gemara begins by discussing the mitzvah of the bracha on the sukkah and the bracha on the arba minim. Do you say them once, or do you say them 7 times? So the Gemara says it's a machlokas. The Gemara first brings 3 opinions. Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Shmuel, says lulav you say a bracha all 7 days, and sukkah you only say a bracha 1 day. What's the reason? Lulav you can't do at night, therefore it's broken up into 7 separate time zones in which you can do the mitzvah, and therefore requires 7 brachos. Sukkah, you could sit in the sukkah and there's a mitzvah of a sukkah straight through the entire time, so it's one long time unit, and you say a bracha only once. Now, that's Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel. Rabbi Yochanan is 2 different versions of what his opinion is. Rabbi Bar Bachana says that Rabbi Yochanan holds that sukkah you say a bracha all 7 days, and that's because it's a mitzvah deraisa all 7 days. Lulav you only say a bracha when it's deraisa. It's only deraisa the first day, and that's when you say the bracha. You don't say a bracha on the Zeichel and Mikdash that we do lulav all the other days of Sukkot. That's Rabbi Bar Bachana's version. And then the Gemara quotes Ravan's version, who says that you say a bracha on all 7 days, both for sukkah and for lulav. So the Gemara says, what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef says that the halacha is like Rabbi Bar Bachana, because all the other Amoraim we see in Hilchos Sukkah, they go like him. We see that they hold that you do say a bracha on Sukkah all 7 days, like he said. Now the Gemara has a question from a Brisa, which seems to show the opposite. The Brisa says like Yehuda and Shmuel. The Gemara quotes the Brisa at length. The Brisa says, somebody who makes a lulav, he prepares it for himself before Yom Tov by tying it together. On that you say shechiyanu. When he actually picks it up on Yom Tov to be yotzer with it, he says the bracha shekit shedum tosef tzivanu alanti las lulav, and he say it all 7 days. So that's clearly like Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel so far, not like Rabbi Bar Bachana. Then the Brisa continues and it says somebody who builds a sukkah before Yom Tov, again he says a shechiyanu. When he comes into the sukkah to sit down and do the mitzvah, he says shekit shanu. And once he says the bracha the first day, it doesn't say a bracha anymore. So both of these are kasha on what we said the halacha is. So the Gemara says, let's deal with it one at a time. Lulav and lulav is not a kasha. That which Rabbi Bar Bachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha is that you only say a bracha on lulav once. That's talking when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed and you only have deraisa 1 day. The Brisa here, which says you make a bracha on lulav every day, that's talking about when the Beis HaMikdash is still standing and you have a mitzvah deraisa of lulav in the Beis HaMikdash every day of Sukkot. That's why you say a bracha every day. Even Rabbi Yochanan would agree to that. Now, what do we do with Sukkah? So Gemara says that is because there's actually machlokas tanaim on the subject. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Bar Bachana, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, says like one Tana which holds that you say a bracha all 7 days, and this Tana holds you only say a bracha once. Where do we see this machlokas tanaim? We see it in the mitzvah of tefillin. Tefillin you can take tefillin on and off as many times as you want. Within 1 day, it's all doing the mitzvah again and again within the same time. There was never any ending of the time that she could do tefillin, but she did it again and again. That's just like sitting in the sukkah on all the days of Sukkot. So the same machlokas, which applies in one, should apply in the other. We have a brisa which shows that there's a machlokas in tefillin. If you put it on more than once a day, do you say a new bracha? The Gemara quotes as a machlokas Rebbe and the Chachamim. Rebbe says you say a new bracha, but Chachamim say you only say a bracha once a day. The Gemara wants to say the same machlokas should be whether you say a bracha on the sukkah. So the Gemara doesn't argue with that. The Gemara just discusses what is the halacha, who do we paskin like. So Abai says the halacha is like Rebbe. Rebbe says that the halacha is like the Rabbanan, you only say a bracha once a day. But the Gemara quotes Rav Mari, the son of the daughter of Shmuel, who says that I saw Rava do not like what you're quoting him as holding the halacha is. You're saying that he holds that you only say a bracha once a day. I saw him say a bracha multiple times a day. I saw him take his tefillin off to use the bathroom, wash his hands, come back, put tefillin on again more than once, and he said a bracha each time again. So you see, he doesn't actually hold that way. Halacha lemaisa. Says the Gemara, we do halachically like Rebbe, and we say a bracha on the sukkah all 7 days, and presumably also we say a bracha on tefillin every time you put them on, because the two halachas are considered to be the same. Now the Gemara quotes some more people and their activities as far as tefillin. The Gemara says, the Mazutra said, I saw a Papi, every time he put tefillin on during the same day, he said bracha, and the Rabbanan from the Yeshiva of Rav Ashi, every time they touched that tefillin, they said another bracha. Okay, now the Gemara quotes another set of Amoraim, and the same machlok is about saying a bracha on the lulav once or 7 times. The Gemara quotes machlokes of Yehuda Amar Shmuel, which is the same thing we saw before. He says you say a bracha on the lulav each day of Sukkot. Rishua ben Levi says you say bracha only the first day because that's dairaisa, and afterwards it's mitzvahs zekanim, was it takana Rav Yechon ben Zakkai. The Gemara brings what sounds like another opinion, and it's Rabbi Yitzchak, and he says that the mitzvah of lulav every day is a mitzvah of zekanim. Every day it's just a takana, and therefore you wouldn't say a bracha. And the Gemara says every day, even the first day. What do you mean? First day has to be daraisa. Some day has to be daraisa. The Gemara says he means except for the first day. Except for the first day, that's the same as Rabbi Shua ben Levi. The Gemara says yes, that's what he was saying. The same as Rabbi Shua ben Levi. We should amend the text to be v'chein Amar Rav Yitzchak. He also says the same halacha. Now, Rav, the Gemara says, also holds that you say a bracha every day. And the Gemara first says we could learn that out of something that Rav says by Chanukah, and then the Gemara says Rav said it explicitly in the mitzvah of lulav. Now, by Chanukah, Rav says like this: as somebody who lights ner Chanukah has to say a bracha, and he has to say a bracha every day of Chanukah is a presumption here. So each day is a new bracha, and he would say the same thing. Each day of Sukkot, you say a new bracha on the lulav. And the mitzvah of Chanukah is a mitzvah derabanan. So if he says it by Chanukah, then even if lulav is derabanan, he will still say it. So the Gemara adds that there's 2 types of brachas. There's a bracha that you say for lighting. There's a bracha you say even if you just see it. That means that you didn't get a chance to light, and possibly you won't get a chance to light. You say what's called birchas haroa. You say the bracha of sha'asa nisim. You don't say lahad l'kner because you're not doing lahad l'kner, but you say sha'asa nisim. So the Gemara explains. So the first night, somebody who lights would say 3 brachos, Shechiyanu, Sha'asa Nisim, and Lahad L'Kner. And on the, it will be Lahad L'Kner before Sha'asa Nisim, and Shechiyanu, of course, would be last. And all the other nights, the person who's lighting would say 2 brachos, Lahad L'Kner, and Sha'asa Nisim. The person who sees would not say Lahad L'Kner, would only say Sha'asa Nisim. So Gemara asks, how could you say a mitzvah, Lahad L'Kner? The Torah never commanded you. So Gemara says, the Torah commanded you to listen to Chachamim. 2 psukim that show that the Torah commanded you to listen to Chachamim. One is Lo Yisasar, don't turn away from everything that they tell you, and therefore when the Rabbanan said there's a mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, you have a mitzvah daraisa to listen to them. The other is Sha'al Avicha v'Yageidcha, ask your father and he will tell you, listen to what the elders and the Chachamim tell you, and therefore you have a mitzvah, again, to listen to the Chachamim to light Ner Chanukah, and that's why we could say a bracha, Asher Kid Shalom Toizav Tivanu, referring to Hashem. Okay, now Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak is one who has a version of Rav where he says explicitly that the bracha on the sukkah, on the lulav, is all 7 days. Okay, now the Gemara brings a brisa that also discusses the making of the sukkah and the bracha of Shechiyanu on it. So the brisa says that somebody who builds the sukkah, it says Shechiyanu, when he actually enters the sukkah to do the mitzvah on sukkahs, he says Asher Kiddishanu. Now, if the sukkah was already built, so you should try to add something. You should try to do something new in it so that he could say Shechiyanu. If he can't, and he doesn't actually ever build a sukkah, he just walks into a sukkah, so then he says a shechianu when he comes into the sukkah. He says both shechianu and leishev basukkah. Says Gemara, Rav Ashi says, I saw that Rav Kahana says them both as part of Kiddush, both the shechianu and the leishev he added to the Kiddush on the first night of Sukkot. Now the Gemara discusses, as a tangential issue here, what happens if you have a number of mitzvahs in front of you, like Kiddush and Sukkah, for example. Do you say multiple brachas, or do you say only one general bracha? So the Gemara quotes a brisa. The Tanakama says you say one general bracha, shekin shanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu al ha-mitzvahs. One bracha which applies to all the mitzvahs non-specifically. Rabbi Yehuda says no, you make a separate bracha on each of them. Rav Zera and Rabbi Chanina bar Papa say the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. And what's the reason? They say because we have a pasuk that says Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. You should bless Hashem each day. Each day, you don't bless Hashem at night, only during the day. The Gemara says it means that each day, which is a mitzvah, you say a separate bracha particular to the day. For Sukkot, you say something Sukkot. For Pesach, you say something for Pesach, something specific to the day. If you say something specific to the day, you should certainly say something specific to the mitzvah. Now, this is quoted by Rav Zera, possibly Rav Chanina bar Papa. So the Gemara quotes another thing that he said. He said, "Look how Kadosh Baruch Hu's midas are different than the midas of human beings. In human life, if you have a kli which is empty, you can put stuff into it. If you have a kli which is full, you can't put stuff into it. Kadosh Baruch Hu is differently. If you learn and you know, you could learn and know more. If you don't learn and know, then there's no space in there for anything." Where do you see that? The Torah says, "V'hayim shemaya tishma." If you will hear, so then tishma, you'll hear more. You'll have more space for more. But if you won't be shemaya, you won't learn anything. So then you won't tishma. You won't have space for anything else. The Gemara brings another pasuk that says, the Gemara brings another explanation of Im Shemaya Tishma. Im Shemaya B'yashin, if you'll review old things that you learned already, then Tishma Chadash, you'll be able to learn new things. But if not, if you turn away, then you won't understand anything else. You need to review what you learned before in order to have the information which will help you understand the new things. Okay, now the Gemara refers back to the Mishnah where we had seen that at the end of Sukkot, on the last day after the mitzvah of Lulav and Esrog were completed, they would knock the esrogim out of the hands of the children. So the Gemara introduces machlokes, and this Mishnah will come back to be a proof potentially to either side. Okay, what's the machlokes? Machlokes is, what is the halacha of the esrog and the sukkah when you finish using them? We know that the entire time that you have an esrog and a sukkah, it's set aside for the mitzvah. You cannot use it for anything else. You cannot eat the esrog. You cannot use the boards of the sukkah for firewood. It's part of the mitzvah. The question is, what happens when the mitzvah is over? So Rish Lakish and Rav Yechanan are the first people who speak on the subject. Rish Lakish doesn't talk about the sukkah. Rav Yechanan says the sukkah, all 7 days are asr. The 8th day, Shmini Atzeres, it's also asr. You cannot use the sukkah for anything. It's considered set aside, even though you're not going to sit in the sukkah on the 8th day. The Gemara explains, because in Bein Hashmashos, which is the moments in between Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, when it's a bit of each of them, in those moments, the sukkah is still set aside for the mitzvah, because if you wanted to eat something now, you would still have to eat it in the sukkah, because it's possibly sukkah still. It's still considered to be sukkah, at least in some respect. Therefore, in those beginning moments, it's still set aside for the mitzvah. And the halacha is, in beginning moments of any Yom Tov or Shabbos, something which is set aside stays set aside for the whole day. Whatever it is in the beginning moments determines the status for the rest of the day. Therefore, the beginning moments of Shmini Atzeres, the sukkah is still set aside for the mitzvah. You can't sit in the sukkah, therefore, even on Shmini Atzeres. Now, what about the esrog? So here you have a machlokes between Rav Yechanan and Rish Lakish. Rav Yechanan says, the esrog you cannot use on the 7th day of Yom Tov. It's set aside for all 7 days. The 8th day you could use it, because Bein Hashmashos there was no function to it. Once you did the mitzvah already in the morning of Hoshana Rabbah, the last day of Sukkot, there's no real function to it. It's just set aside because the esrog was set aside for the mitzvah all 7 days. Shmini Atzeres already, you could use the esrog, you could eat it, no problem. Rish Lakish says even earlier. Rish Lakish says as soon as you finish the mitzvah on Hoshana Rabbah morning, you can eat the esrog right then. It's not set aside for a set amount of days, it's set aside for a set amount of mitzvahs. Once you finish the mitzvah, it's not set aside anymore. It's considered to be something which you could use without a problem. Now, the Gemara says two versions of who brought a proof from them from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that they used to knock the esrogim out of the hands of the children and eat them. So you see that they ate it on a sukkah, but it says it by children. So according to one version, it's a proof to Reish Lakish because it says they're allowed to eat it. According to the other version, it's a proof to Rav Yochanan because it implies only a children's esrog you're allowed to eat, but a regular esrog you're not allowed to eat until Sukkot is over. Either way, the answer says that it's either dafka, that it's lav dafka. Either, if the proof was that it says only children, we say no, it applies to everyone's esrog. It just says children because those are the ones that you could usually knock their esrogim away. And if it's referring to, if the proof was that it's you see that you're not allowed to eat it, the answer would be no, it's only children, not anyone else. Does not apply to adults because you're not allowed to eat it at that point onward. Okay, now the Gemara quotes additional Amoraim who weigh in on the subject. There's a third opinion, as Levi. Levi says is that the esrog is also even on Shemini Atzeres. He would seem to hold, it's not explained, but he would seem to hold that because even Bein Hashmoshes, it's still considered to be also to use the esrog, it's still the time of the esrog, and therefore it's also the entire Shmini Atzeres as well. Now, Shmuel's father, Avud Shmuel, he switched. He first said that esrog is usher until the end of Sukkot, but on Shmini Atzeres it's mutter, and then he switched to hold like Levi and said it's usher even on Shmini Atzeres. Rabbi Zera, therefore, he went and he took the Avud Shmuel's first opinion. And he says, his quote is referring to a puzzle esrog. He says that you cannot eat it all 7 days, but you are allowed to eat it after the 7th day. That is Avud Shmuel's original opinion. Now, Rabbi Zera says a few more halachas. He says you should not give your lulav esrog or any of the four minim to a child before you're yotze with it, at least on the first day, because it needs to belong to you. And you give it to a child, so midrabanan a child can be kind of something. It belongs to him. And now he does not, however, have the das. He does not have the wherewithal intellectually to give it away. If you let a child give things away, he'll give everything away. So we do not say that a child giving something away belongs to the person that he gave it to. Therefore, it's stuck by him. He can never give it away. And you'll never be able to get it back, and therefore you will not be able to use it for the mitzvah because it has to belong to you. You don't have lochem. Now, Rav Zera says another halach relating to giving things to children. He said if you promise to give something to a child, make sure you give it. Don't let anything interfere, because otherwise you'll be teaching him to speak falsehood. Limdu l'shana l'daber sheker. Now the Gemara says that Rav Ami and Rav Asi had a machlokes which aligns up with the machlokes between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish as to whether you're allowed to use the esrog on the 7th day. Rav Ami and Rav Asi are discussing a case where somebody bought a separate esrog for each day of Sukkot. The question is, after he uses the esrog of the day, what does he do with it? So it's not Rav Ami, it's Rav and Rav Asi. So according to Rav, he could eat it right away as soon as he does it. The Gemara says that goes like the opinion of Reish Lakish. It was only set aside for the mitzvah, not for the day. According to Rav Asi, you can't eat it that day, you can only eat it the next day. The next day, it's over, it's not set aside anymore. You only set it aside for this day specifically. So the next day, you could eat it. But this day, you would not be allowed to eat it because it was set aside for the whole day, and that's like the opinion of Rav Yochanan. Now, what do we do? What's the halacha? So the Gemara says that well, it's not spelled out, but Rashi says because Rav Asi and Rav Yochanan have the same shita, therefore we would do like them and say that it's also for the whole day. And where therefore follows up with what do we do now that we have Sfeika D'Yoma? So the Shmini Atzeres, we are not sure if it's really the 7th day of Sukkot or if it's Shmini Atzeres. So Abaye says therefore it's usher that day because it might be Sukkot. But the 2nd day of Shmini Atzeres, which is for sure Shmini Atzeres and not Sukkot anymore, then it's mutter. And Mareimar says that once it's Shmini Atzeres, even on the first day of Shmini Atzeres, which is a suffix Sukkos, we still say that it's mutter. And Sur they did like Mareimar. Rav Shisha Breder of Idi did halacha like Abaye, and the Gemara says that the halacha is actually like Abaye, that the first day of Shmini Atzeres, the lulav and esrog are also.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.